All right, here we are at professional tutorial number 4, and our topic is diminutions. Now, this is a big topic, so we'll spend some time on it. Diminutions are the small notes that connect the structural notes of bass motions and harmonizations. Because music obviously does not just consist of spare bass motions and chords, rule of the octave, C5, Durante, whatever it may be. Obviously, there are all these moving notes in between, and those are called diminutions. So when you open your Bach and look at all these 16th notes running around, many of those, maybe even most of those, are connecting between the structural or the more important tones that are part of the chords and bass motions. So we're going to look at how these work. Essentially, any interval has multiple ways that I can connect it from one note to another. So let's just start talking about steps. All right? So let's take a simple bass motion, an ascending 5/6. Everything in an ascending 5/6 moves by step. And that actually sounds fine, and you will occasionally hear this unadorned 5/6 in the literature. Maybe choral, might do this. Organ, strings, instrumental, keyboard might, but tends to be more ornate. But I don't have to play only the structural notes of the ascending 5/6. I can, first of all, just use the existing pitches, but play an extra note, and it creates more of a sense of decoration. So instead of this, I can do this. Now this is interesting because I'm not adding any new pitches at all. I'm just reiterating each note with a nice staccato just before it moves. And that in itself changes the texture really quite noticeably, maybe dramatically. Okay, however, what if I do this? So, or now it's really starting to get more complex and quite interesting. So those diminutions are just connecting notes, little patterns that allow me to get to the next note in, kind of a fancy way. If I want to get up and walk out the door, I can just do that in a very plain way, or I can get up and spin in the air and jump and do a ninja move. And it's just a fancier way of getting where we were going to get. So I particularly like this because it's almost like it backs up, it goes down to get a running start. And then goes beyond the previous note to the next highest one. Okay, so now what I'm doing here is I'm kind of matching the diminutions in all the voices so that the texture sounds very consistent. We could do the same thing. That's a descending 7/6, and I'm putting diminutions on the top two voices. Now what's so interesting here is as I put those diminutions on the top voice, and Now the next diminutions go to the middle voice. They actually kind of run together, and so they end up sounding like a single voice. Okay? And it might even be written that way with just a single voice that passes all the way through. So sometimes the diminutions are rather well hidden in the written texture. So let's look at a series of diminutions for a variety of intervals and how they work. So the first interval we should think about, before we even worry too much about steps, is unisons. So what if a voice is not moving, but we still want it to be interesting while it doesn't move? Okay? So I could go below and then back. I could go below, or above and below, and then below and above. I could do that. A variety of ways. So I could even create a diminution on a note that doesn't move. Really, if you think about it, what is a trill? It's just a diminution of a note that isn't moving. It's just using the note next to it, above or below, to decorate it, in a way. So unisons, by the way, in the study document for this video, I will put a chart of suggested diminutions for various intervals. So with the step, we already talked. I can jump down a third and then come up, or I can go up a third and then down. What else? Could just do something like that. I use that one a lot with 7/6. Okay, so it's just the note above, and then it goes on. Thirds, and incidentally, I should break in here. I'm assuming that we're working with 4/16 notes, and that we have 4 notes to use. But obviously, that's not always the case. We'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, thirds. I could just... I can drive up to it, beyond, and then stop. Or go down and then up to it. Right? That works perfectly well. Fourths are nice. Right? Da, 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 da. Or there's a nice one. Right? Let's see. Let's do... So those are rising fourths with diminutions. Fifths are lovely if you actually have 4/16 notes, because you just can go straight to it. Okay? So, if I were doing a C5 progression, I can just walk down in the bass. Now, if I'm coming up, that's a fourth, so I can't walk all the way there. Now, so I have to use 2 different diminutions, one for the fourth, one for the fifth. Let's put this together with upper voices. Something more interesting in the right hand. I think in the right hand, because we have these, I'm going to just do that little staccato note thing before it moves. So faster. Sorry, mistake. Okay. Something like that, okay? So I'm doing diminutions of fourths and fifths in the left hand and diminutions of well, I'm almost doing nothing, just that staccato note in the right hand. All right, so these are all in a chart. I think the chart goes up even to sixths. And the way I like to practice this is using well-established, very, very familiar bass motions. So you could use RO, C5. We've looked at Durante. Have we looked at anything else? Probably. You could take any one of those and add diminutions to it. Now, if you are in a compound meter where the unit of rhythm is a triplet, you have one less note to use, and so you can't get as far. So what would we do with triplets? If we were doing an ascending 5-6, okay, I could do that to rise a step. So they change if you're in a different meter and you have sixteenths instead of triplets. Also, if you are only using eighths, now you have even fewer choices if you're just going to fill in an eighth note. So often your only option is just a neighboring tone for a unison. For going up a step, you can jump past it and back. That's always a nice one. So there I'm doing diminutions in the bass and only using I only have one diminution note I can stick in there, so I'm going to jump above and come back. The nice thing about eighth notes is that if you are moving a third, you always can just fill in the passing tone. So if I'm playing here, I know that I can always just go, I can just fill in that third with this passing tone. Or even do that over a non-changing harmony. So thirds you can always just fill in. It'll be no problem. All right, so a kind of exercise for this would be, I would go back to RO first and play. You could play in 3 or 4 voices. Either one is okay. If this is hard, try 3. And what you want to do is put a diminution only in one voice at a time. So let's do 3 voices. Something like that. And I'm just going to put diminutions in the soprano. Okay? And I'm going to decide how many rhythmic notes do I have. So if I have 4 notes, 4 16th notes, how would I get to here in 4 notes? Well, that's always a nice one. Or, let's see. That's a nice one. So I need to use some diminution that would get me there. For now, I'm going to use that. Now, where am I going next? Soprano. If I'm going up again, that's good. Now, I'm going down to here. I could do something like that. Now, I'm not moving, so ya-da-da-da-da. let's try that maybe without stopping as much. Now I could try them in the middle voice, in the alto. With the middle voice, sometimes you'll run out of room to do the diminutions you want to because the other voice is crowded out. So I'm going to allow myself to do simpler diminutions, maybe just the staccato eighth note or just a passing eighth note or something. But I'm going to try to ornament that. Okay? And I'm going to think where it's going. Middle voice, where are you going? Oh, you're not moving at all there. Okay, so not gonna move. I like that. And then what do we do here? It's all possible. All right? Now, what about the bass? Well, since the bass is always moving by step, it's actually kind of easy to get the diminutions, right? So that might start to sound a little bit old. So what if I did something like trading the 4-note 16 notes with just the repeated 8th note. So this really is where you start to get a change from the texture of chords only, or figuration only, or unmeasured fantasia only, into a more polyphonic sound. And if you kind of work your way through these bass motions and practice doing diminutions, you will get used to creating an 18th century texture just very easily without having to worry about it. I think at first it's quite difficult to get your mind to do it. I think you'll have to practice this for a while. But getting that sound, it does come if you practice it. And by the way, if you look especially at the suites of J.S. Bach, the French suites, the partitas and English suites as well, but especially the French suites, you will see this concept of what I call diminution trading, where there are multiple voices going on and they take turns using diminutions. Because normally there are often 2 voices in each hand. Sometimes 1 in the left, 2 in the right, but often there are 2 in each hand. If both voices are very busy with diminutions, the hand can't really do it. And so what you end up seeing is the voices taking turns using diminutions even within one hand. So let me give you one example. Let's do a C5 in the key of D. So if I use this normal 3-voice disposition with the 7ths in the right hand, I always have the right hand is going 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th, right? So here's where we start. Here's the 5th. Who moves? Soprano's going to move. Alto's going to move. Soprano's going to move. Alto. Okay? Basic C5 voice leading. So if the voice that moves gets the diminution, we start already to get an interesting polyphonic texture. Okay, what if we do ti 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 ti, or let's do ya ta 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 as our diminution, okay? Alright, I'll do that again slowly. All I'm doing is the voice in the right hand that's moving, before it moves down, I'm creating that little diminution on it. So, alright? Now, it could be possible to, what if I try to combine that with the fourths and fifths we talked about earlier? Very interesting. The only problem you sometimes run into when you're doing diminutions in both voices is these weird cross relations. If you listen to this. See, I've got these bizarre parallel ninths between outer voices that don't really sound very good. Okay, so we would probably avoid that and find some other way to do diminutions. I don't think we need the bass to be so active. How about just... That sounds good. So I'm just turning the bass into 2 eighth notes. Now I don't have any voice leading problems. So it is possible, even if your bass motion and harmonic stuff is all correct voice leading, that by adding diminutions you can create voice leading issues. So just be aware of that. That's one of the reasons why we often will see only one voice at a time adding diminutions. If 2 voices are, often they're either contrary motion so that they don't crash into each other, or they're in parallel consonant intervals. This also is going to tend to happen. So for something fun to do, I would do RO, do diminutions on one voice at a time, and then, if you really want to have some fun, go through RO and each chord give a different voice a diminution. So on the first one, you know, the bass, the second one, middle voice, the third, top one, and just keep trading and doing diminution trading. This is the essence of getting a true polyphonic sound when you improvise at the keyboard. And I think it takes a long time to get comfortable with it, so be very patient and just go slowly and be kind to yourself and try the simplest diminutions. All right, there we go. Have a great day.